Hi, everybody. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Politics with Sherry Jacobus. Thank you for subscribing. And if you just happen to find me from scrolling around, I hope you'll help me out and hit that subscribe button. So we're a couple days in now, 3 days into the government shutdown. Polls show that overall, Americans mostly blame Republicans for the shutdown. They at least have a basic understanding, and they're paying attention, and they will as time goes on. They have a basic understanding, obviously, that Republicans have the White House, the House, and the Senate. And even though Trump and MAGA Republicans are dominating the news media because Democrats are not fighting back, as we've been begging Chuck Schumer to do by having daily fact checking briefings from the Capitol with a high profile spokesperson, a super staffer. We've talked about this many times. We've suggested Mayor Pete. But because we don't have that, because Chuck Schumer will not do that, and he would be the one to just have to, give the nod, the go ahead for this, and we can make it happen in a matter of days. I know how to make it happen. We don't have that. So Democrats are pretty much handing all the media over to Republicans for this, not individual Democrats. We see them out there doing podcasts, doing their own thing. But unless you are the leader, like Chuck Schumer is, to be able to give the okay for these briefings in the Capitol building, which is where they would have to be under the auspices of Congress, the Democratic side. But it was that, then it would be the beat of the press that are there in the House and Senate press galleries. That's why you have to have it there. Lacking that, they're all doing it on their own. That said, Republicans still kind of sort of, Republicans and Democrats, Americans still kind of sort of get it, that it is the Republicans who are doing this. I hope that holds, because that is the currency in this climate. That is the only currency that matters. So keep fighting Democrats individually. And I don't know what we do about Schumer. But so that's the one thing. We also know, because I want to give good news, not just for the sake of giving good news. I don't think that we, as grown-ups, want to demand that, well, if you're going to have 2 or 3 pieces of bad news, you have to have 2 or 3 pieces of good news. If it doesn't reflect reality, then when we're just not helping ourselves at all. But the other good news is that we're seeing some feedback and some information and some polling and some anecdotal information that shows that young MAGA Christians, the young people, are really getting turned off by the cruelty and the negativity and the violence and the terrorism of Trump's ICE agents, having the National Guard come in, telling the military to use military force against American citizens and, practice on Democratic cities. They didn't count on this. When they see, little kids hauled naked out of their apartments, their homes, separated from their parents and zip tied around their wrists, this is starting to bother young MAGA. Maybe not all of them, but enough. It's starting to sink in. They're saying this is not what we supported. Remember, they were very specifically targeted with messaging to kind of mess with their heads and not really based on reality. As they start seeing the reality, it means an entirely different thing. Now, other MAGA like the brutality and the violence. They love this. It's their porn. There's a reason why Corey Lewandowski is actually really the head of Department of Homeland Security. It's not really Kristi Noem, it's Corey. And from the very start, we've seen his violence against women, how he bruised up a reporter. Remember, that was 2015, 26. Yeah, it was in 2015. So he's there for a reason. He likes this stuff, just like Stephen Miller likes this stuff. Trump is a criminal mind and a criminal and a sociopath. And I believe that many of the others around him are as well. They seek these jobs out, and Trump likes having them in the jobs. That the cruelty is the point. They are criminals. They are mentally dangerous. And we know this. But there are some MAGA in this country that like this. I'm seeing these. Okay, so the young MAGA are like, hey, this is not what we voted for. Well, their daddies and their uncles do. Their MAGA dads and uncles like this stuff. They love it till it happens to them. So I guess my point is that I was thinking for a long time that just pointing out the cruelty and the brutality to MAGA would make them see how horrific their orange Jesus is, how horrific Trump is. And, they all call themselves Christians, of course. They're not. Any Christianity I've ever heard of. They kind of make up their own rules. We have the Pope out there calling this stuff out. But these people who like to call themselves Christians, they don't care what the Pope has to say. Their spirit, their God is Trump, and we know that. So I always thought that pointing out how horrible these actions are and how they're hurting people would not. First, I thought it would make a difference. Then I decided it wouldn't make a difference. They are too cruel. We can go around the edges, everything. As I say, close elections are won or lost in the margins. But I've been preaching that only when it affects them or someone close to them will they care. Only then, like the farmers that voted for Trump, and then they get ruined by him. So now he's bailing them out. He's only going to bail out people in red states, as if there are no Democrats in red states or no Republicans in blue states or blue areas. So, but Trump's an idiot, so we know that. So I'm starting to think now that perhaps there are some MAGA, now that we know there are young MAGA that do care, that do have a heart, but it might be because they were targeted and got different information. I do not believe the older MAGA care. I think they like it. I think they love what Corey Lewandowski does. I think that this is their jam. All right. The cruelty is the point. Stoachet's terrorism is the point. Okay. The brutality is the point. So I'm glad that the younger MAGA are starting to figure out that this ain't the way to heaven, guys. This is not Christianity. This doesn't make you a good guy. The older ones, maybe not so much until it affects them. So I'm hoping that we can help our Democratic elected officials get the message out every time a Trump policy affects these people, because it may take a while for them to know. If they're only watching Fox News isn't going to tell them, right? Right. And it's not like Chuck Schumer is facilitating daily press briefings where then it would be carried even on Fox News. The cameras would be there, be on par with the White House press briefing. It would be the answer. It would be the he said, she said, the she said, he said. And right now we're just ceding this space to Trump and to MAGA. But I want it to be every article, every news story on TV. When they have Caroline Levitt or Trump, they would also have the Democratic side of this, the fact checking. Even if they don't want to say if the facts are right or wrong, because we know American press doesn't do that anymore. But even if they just put it out there, this side says this side says that, at least we'd have that. Right now, we don't have that. We don't have that. And we also leave it up to the networks and the shows to invite Democrats on, and then they decide what their messaging is. That is giving them too much power. If you take control of the content and what they have available to them to use in their very specific allotted times for their shows and their newscasts, you at least have some element of control. So it is beyond me, as a longtime political communications strategist, a professional, practicing it successfully and teaching it at the master's level. It is beyond me why Democrats aren't doing just the most basic things. It's extremely harmful. So at least we know that young people, young MAGA, are starting to get a little queasy about what Trump is doing. Old MAGA like it. Old MAGA will respond when it affects them. So a couple of things, especially the older MAGA who are in those rural areas. Rural areas tend to be red areas. When they realize that they can no longer do telehealth visits with their doctors if they're on Medicare, Medicaid, that Medicare is no longer going to cover those, it's going to affect them. We started doing this in 2020 during the pandemic. It really helped a lot of people. It's better for doctors if they can treat patients that way, or tell them, yeah, you need to come in or do this first. And if you're in a rural area and you're an elderly person trying to make your way to the town or the city where your doctor is, sometimes can be impossible. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal. Now for psychiatrists, for psychologists, for psychiatric sessions, they can still do the telehealth visits, but every 6 months they have to be in person with their psychiatrist or psychologist. So, at least it's an acknowledgement that telehealth visits do matter and are helpful. But once some of these MAGA people start figuring out what's really happening, okay, the farmers found out. Trump realized they found out. They effed around and found out. Then Trump effed around and found out. So now he's going to fix it by using our tax dollars to give them a bailout because they voted for him. See how this goes? So education matters. Fact checking matters. And if Chuck Schumer won't allow Democrats to do it, he won't facilitate it in a way that needs to be done to really match what the White House is doing, because again, that can only be done from the Capitol, then Democrats have to figure out another way. So younger MAGA, they're squeamish about what Trump is doing based on just humanitarian concerns, moral concerns. Older MAGA, especially the men, they only care once it affects them. So what I recommend is that we drill down with that crowd on how these draconian policies affect them. And it might seem like little things in the beginning, but say you're a MAGA guy with your truck and your flags on it, you live out in the country, and your mom has been doing the telehealth visits. She's on Medicare. Now she can't do them. And this has been something that she's been doing for 5 years, 5.5 years since the pandemic. And now Trump has decided that you got to take off work, go get your mom and drive her to the nearest city and take her to her doctor's appointments. Okay, maybe you're okay with that, but just so you know that Trump did this to you. Whereas for 5 years, it's worked perfectly well for her to do a number of her visits as telehealth visits. And now you got to haul her into the nearest city. Hope you take her to lunch too. So that's just one example. The farmers are another example. It always causes Trump to cave a little bit, doesn't it? So our voices matter, but I think it's important that we educate MAGA. The best way to do that, I guess, is on Facebook. Maybe we don't fight with them. Maybe you just show them, just say, by the way, you've got to take your mom now, drive into the nearest city, 2 hours away or whatever, to take her to her visits. You can't do telehealth anymore. If they don't believe you, they want to fight with you. You don't have to fight with them. Just show them the facts. Give them the facts. And then they find out on their own. When they get when those on the exchanges, when they get their bills for their health insurance premiums, whether they voted for Republicans or they voted for Democrats, whether they're a Trump supporter or not, to see your monthly premium more than double, while Democrats are trying to save that from happening and Republicans are making it happen, you let them know that. Because Chuck Schumer isn't going to be doing a press briefing to have a leading high-profile Democrat with gravitas present that to the American people. And people say, oh, well, Republicans would never watch it. Fox would never carry it. They kind of might. They might kind of have to here and there. But at least you'd be breaking through. At least we'd have clips, news clips, to share all over social media. Right now, you can find a senator here and there. But if you're not from their state or if you don't happen to be listening to the podcast they're on, so we need to have something that blankets everything that becomes available, the same thing that becomes available to everyone. And that would be the daily fact-checking press briefings by Democrats in the Capitol, which we first proposed in February, shortly after Trump was elected, and they still haven't happened. So I guess we're on our own for that. But again, something is breaking through, which means it's possible. So if Chuck Schumer's response would be, well, you can't change their minds. It doesn't matter. We know that's not true. We just know that it's really, really hard. It takes a real investment of time and money and the high profile people with gravitas to do it. If the only reason we do things to save the country is if it's easy, that's kind of the wrong answer. It's hard work, but it's going to be a lot harder the longer we wait. But we can break through because somebody somewhere is breaking through. We're finding out just in these little instances, these little flashpoints, that here and there, somehow certain information is breaking through and it's working. So this is the time to look at what's working and double down on it instead of going, oh, nothing we can do. Nothing we can do. Chuck Schumer hasn't heard us. Anyway, I hope that helps.